Let's start this video off with a very important question. What makes a game have longevity? I mean, look, one way or the other, regardless of how you feel about the current state of League of Legends, for it to be one of the top games in the entire world for basically an entire decade now as well, it means that Riot has done something remarkable, because there have been other releases said to challenge League for its top spot, and they did for a little while. Games like Overwatch, before it was ever released, was dubbed the League Killer, and it had a very realistic chance to be way bigger. And we know how that ended up. Now, keep in mind, that's not to say that other games aren't great, and some of these top games that we've seen on Twitch over the last couple of years are very good games. Overwatch, Apex, PUBG, Fortnite, Rainbow Six, Sea of Thieves, GTA. These games are awesome. And this year, by the way, League is usually not even the top category on Twitch, with Riot's other game Valorant being very popular, GTA 5, Apex, Warzone, Minecraft, and Just Chatting most of the time are right up there, if not surpassing League for that top spot. The constant and consistent changes have brought new and exciting content to this game each and every season. Players might like to generalize about different eras throughout the game's history, and right now in the modern era, you will hear players compare seasons 9 through 11 and say that it's mostly been the same thing. Not that much has really changed over the last few years, right? Well, actually, a lot has. If you don't believe me, just check out this clip. Here we have something that doesn't look that old at first. I mean, the map looks roughly the same, it's just Gosu playing Ezreal back in late 2018. This was only 2.5 years ago. But then you look at it for a second and you realize, wait, this is the old Ezreal. He's been updated since then. You also realize that this is the old Morgana. She's also been updated. There are no alcoves on this map. There are no elemental maps with Infernal, Cloud, Ocean, and Mountain Soul. The items have been completely reworked. And he's using Kleptomancy, a keystone rune that no longer exists. It blows my mind how every year this game changes so much that it becomes unrecognizable for those who haven't played in just a little while, a couple of years at most. It's also a fair argument to distrust Riot and their changes to your favorite game. And this is where we reach an impasse. To say that Riot should be able to just perfectly balance this is as silly as saying League of Legends, or any other video game for that matter, is a perfect game. Because a video game can never really be perfect. It can never please everyone, but it should be able to please its core player base. The definition of a game with good longevity is one that's able to please its core players, and I do think that League of Legends has been able to do that over the last decade until now. And I think there's one huge problem that we have to talk about with League of Legends. This game has a huge issue with new champions. This video is brought to you by Core. Core is a revolutionary new way to play over 20,000 plus games with your friends completely for free. The concept is super cool. The Core universe is full of all of these games created by people like you and me. Coding and programming is really tough to learn, but it's never been easier to make your own games with Core. All of this is powered by Unreal Engine, which if you've never used before is a super hands-on way to make any game that you can think of. Once you're done, you and your friends and anyone else can play your created game. I've had tons of fun trying out a lot of these games, such as this mini golf game. It's casual fun, but can also get really competitive when it's a close match.
Alright, par. We'll take 2.
I'm embarrassed to say that I missed 3 straight putts getting
I saw your ball scoop forward and I didn't.
As League players, one of the games that all of us can enjoy is called Nexus Wars. It's a shooter MOBA where you can siege the enemy's base and farm up for items. As you can clearly see, the possibilities with Core are endless, and if you want to make a game, go for it. If you play Core by August 29th, you can unlock the limited time Gamescom t-shirt and hoodie. It's a really cool item for your Core character. New games are added every single day. It's free to create, free to play, and free to have fun. Even just hoverboarding around in the Core hub world got my attention right away. Core has partnered up with Epic Games and has launched an early access for you to get in and try right now. So use my link in the description down below, and thank you again to Core for the sponsor. This issue is the ultimate teeter-totter because on the one hand, games that never change become stagnant and boring. As gamers, we need new updates. We expect new things to keep us interested. And at the same time, power creep constant change, overpowered new ideas, will leave the old game, the one that you fell in love with in the first place, in the dust. This whole thing kind of reminds me of a clip from an old Vsauce video. Michael brings up this very interesting philosophical situation where a surgeon would start taking cells from my body and cells from your body and swapping them one at a time. And after a while, the surgeon would finish, and all of my cells would be in your body and all of your cells would be in my body. Now, at what point do I officially, in this process, become you? This is a totally nonsensical question because it could never happen in real life, but the point that he makes is still very intriguing. Would it be after 50% of the cells were swapped? 90% maybe? Or do we need to wait fully until 100% of the cells were swapped for me to officially be you and you would be me? Making so many changes to a video game is kind of like this. Sure, Season 1 and Season 11 League of Legends share the same name for this game, and they have a similar map conceptually, they even have a few similar champions, but at what point does this game no longer become the one that players fell in love with? Let's make one thing clear. I'm not against new champions, although I guess to be fair, I kinda used to be. Let me take you back to last summer where during the Spirit Blossom event of 2020, 2 new champions came out, Yone and Lilia. Now throughout my time playing League, I've played a lot of Yasuo, and specifically in the bottom lane is where I like to take him. It's fun to combo him with like an Alistar or a Nautilus support. So when Yone's kit looked extremely similar to Yasuo's, I thought for sure that he would not only kill the champion since he was just going to be the better Yasuo now, I also figured that I would love playing him. I honestly thought during the champion trailer that he would become my new main, and in the past we saw old champions become obsolete due to a new champion replacing them. Many of the on-hit 80 carries were not going to be meta right after Kai'Sa's release, who did everything they did but better. I'm sure right now you have your own examples in mind of a champion who just replaced an older one. Seraphine and Sona, anyone? Maybe Pyke and Blitzcrank? So was I right about Yone completely replacing Yasuo? No, I was wrong. Turns out that both can exist and still fit within this game. When it came to me playing him though, yeah, I mean I gave him a try and picked him up, and I would estimate that I have about 25 games or so on the champ, but I didn't take a liking to him the way that I originally thought. Instead, something surprised me even more. As a non-jungle main who doesn't like the look of the champion, there was no chance that I would actually give Lilia a try. I mean, look at this character, this dopey looking crackhead half-deer girl thing. I'm not gonna like that champ. Well, 1 year later, Lilia might actually be my favorite champ to play in the entire game. It still blows my mind to this day. I remember the first game that I tried her out. It was about 2 weeks after her release, and it was just a normal game, so it didn't matter anyway, and I thought, you know, whatever, let's give it a go. And it went really well. For whatever reason, the champion's kit just clicked with me, and I think she is incredibly fun to play. Recently, she also received some buffs and can now be reliably played in the solo lane, which is something that made me like her even more. But before that, I played her a ton last year in the jungle, despite not being a jungle main, because I really did enjoy playing her that much. This situation changed my perspective on new champions instantly, because I would have never guessed that just based on the champion's looks and theme that I would have enjoyed her. It's a classic case of more than meets the eye. This kind of thing is very good for Riot and very good for League of Legends. The release of Lilia has kept me interested in League of Legends more than I would be if she never came out. I am sure there's plenty of you that have enjoyed some of the new champions that have come out over the last 6 months. It may be the only reason that you're still playing right now and even watching this video. This is why this video is not being made to tell you that all new champions are inherently a bad thing. The real issue comes from how they're being implemented.
No, please. Please, not another new champ, right? I still haven't recovered from last year.
Faker has potentially found his new champion, Gwen. It's come naturally to him. He hasn't lost a single game on it yet.
Ow! Ugh.
This champion was insanely weak.
This is after the hotfixed buff.
don't understand, bro. These champions get released, right? And their win rate's low because they're brand new and they're not the easiest champs. So they get hotfixed buff over and over again, and like Riot wants to sell the champion and skins. He's going to be meta. He's gonna be so disgusting. Bro, like it's another added ban. Actually.
Almost every new champion over the last year and a half gets put into the game in pretty much the worst way possible. By the way, that also extends to some of the reworks as well. When Mordekaiser first got reworked, his day 1 numbers were disgusting, and he cleaned house on the Rift. He had to quickly be nerfed, featuring a day 2 hotfix, and a follow-up hit a few patches later. Nearly every new champion is either drastically overtuned or flat out weak. Now, I say weak with extreme caution and a huge grain of salt though, because most of the time what we're really dealing with is player skill, but we will get back to that in a second. Let's just focus on the ones that were too strong. Viego, Seraphine, Samira, Aphelios, Pyke, Kai'Sa, and Zoe. Each one of these champion kits are so full of abilities, passives, utility, and damage that there was basically no chance that they wouldn't break the game. And in the case of Viego, he quite literally did. Aphelios started the 200 years meme. Samira continued it into 400 years, but it really all started, and all of this can date back to Zoe. Nowadays, Zoe is in a mostly okay spot, at least much better than her release, given that she was the most overloaded and broken champion we had ever seen on her release. Back then, she could do a lot more than she does now, such as picking up a teleport, not even just from enemy champions who used it, but literally from minions. Yeah, that happened. Right after Kai'Sa came out, she completely destroyed the bottom lane meta, and the following MSI saw her rack up a 93% pick ban presence. She was the most banned champion during MSI with 51 bans. Sadly for Pyke mains, he's brought pretty much nothing but trouble to this game, and he can't seem to stay out of the solo lane either, no matter how hard Riot has tried. Seraphine is just the reworked Sona on steroids, and I don't really need to explain Viego all that much because we're currently suffering right now every day this season. With these specific champions, we're not just looking at them and saying that they were a little strong or a little overtuned, which by the way is completely understandable and to be expected with new champions in a game with such an established meta. Riot cannot, will not, and will never be able to completely balance a champion the first day that it comes out. That's unfair to expect that, but that's not what this is. These champions were flat out destructive to the mental of players trying to face them. So what's the other side of that coin then? Which champions were the opposite? Well, that's Akshan, Gwen, Rel, and Yuumi. Each of these champions have seen the exact same pattern happen to them, just in reverse. On release, their win rate wasn't just bad, but more or less record-breaking levels of terrible. Just look at these headlines and these numbers. There's no doubt that on release, these champions were weaker than they were supposed to be. Yuumi isn't so difficult to play that it even makes sense to have a win rate that low. She genuinely was weak. However, there's a lot more to the story. The main reason these champions saw their win rate in the gutter has almost nothing to do with their numbers. Their numbers were weak, yes, but each of these champions were either somewhat difficult to play or so unique that it required a bit of the spicy Voyboy technology to figure out their optimal build and setup. If you don't believe me, we can just go right back to Yuumi if you want, and we can go check out her PBE footage from the time and all of the release videos. It's easy to see what the major innovation was. Every single one of these players is using Flash. One of Yuumi's biggest strengths is her ability to not have to take Flash. It opens up many different possibilities. For high elo play, a good AD carry can take Cleanse and use it pretty well, and the Yuumi can take Heal. Or maybe they can play really aggressive and the Yuumi can take Exhaust Ignite. It doesn't sound like that big of a deal because it's just one summoner spell, but Yuumi is different than other enchanters. She's very different from Soraka, who has to play all the way back in a team fight. Sometimes if you're playing Soraka or Sona or Seraphine, you won't always be in range to use your summoner spells because you kinda have to play so far back due to your lack of tankiness. But again, if Hecarim dives the backline, you're always in exhaust range because you're quite literally attached to the Hecarim. In her case, this one summoner spell makes a huge difference, and it took roughly 2 to 3 weeks for players to figure out it's much more optimal than taking flash. For Gwen, it's not exactly the same thing because there are a lot of different solo laners this season that have taken Ignite Teleport, such as Akali or Camille, but with Gwen, flash is also not necessary. That little bit of innovation has helped a lot of Gwens get solo kills in lane and still be able to impact the map. She doesn't really need flash because of her E. On top of that, people didn't know how to abuse her level 1 on day 1 of her release because they didn't even level her E. Look at this footage where both SRO and Huzzy take Q level 1 and both have flash. That is what everyone was doing right away, but you'll never see this anymore. You take Ignite and TP or Ignite Ghost and start E and get in there and start fighting. What I'm saying is it's not the fault of these guys. It's not the fault of the entire community or of Gwen. It simply takes time for players to figure out what is the best way to play a champion, which isn't really that surprising. For Akshan and Rel, they also saw terrible win rates, but you can nearly just chalk all that up to them being very difficult to play. All of this really does make sense. New champions are new, go figure. But that can't entirely explain a bad win rate, can it? Technically, the enemy Katarina one trick also doesn't know how to play against Akshan, so wouldn't that make them more likely to do bad against him as well? Well, yes, but actually no. In this game, it is way more important to know how to pilot your own champion correctly under generalized circumstances than it is to know how to specifically beat one laning matchup. Shockingly, League isn't just a 1v1 laning game. In fact, a lot of players argue the 1v1 in solo queue barely matters at all because it's such a catastrophe of uncoordinated play. Haven't you ever solo killed Katarina 1 to 2 times and then she walks bot lane and gets a triple kill anyway? The person who is on their main champion, regardless of laning against a brand new one, still has to teamfight against 4 other players. They still have to know how to deal their optimal damage rotation. They still have to put up with the enemy jungler. They still need to know how to play their lane, use their combos, their mechanics, know how to last hit. They can pilot the champion extremely well, while the enemy player is just reading Akshan's abilities. This one's pretty funny, but something that you also don't see too often talked about is you have to kind of consider who is playing these champions on day 1 of their release in ranked as well. I mean, certainly there are going to be people that have put in 30 plus games on the PvE, they've already joined the Akshan's Discord server, they're on the Reddit, they claim to be an expert even though their goal, okay, you know what, I'm not even going to go there, I didn't need to leave that in the script. But that is definitely not the norm. The type of player who is playing a new champion in ranked within the first week is going to be first timing them, and then when they decide to first time a champion, their mindset about the game and their LP is probably going to be different than the one trick who is playing their main champ. I can promise you, a first time week 1 Akshan cares a lot less about winning than the enemy Katarina one trick with 2,500 games on the grind pushing for diamond. That cat one trick will stomp him every single time, and the other guy probably doesn't care that much. These factors really help explain why some of these champions have an abysmal win rate right after their release, and it seems somewhat understandable. So what does Riot do in this case? What is their response? More often than not, a pretty poor choice. It's just immediately hotfix buffing them. For Gwen and Akshan, it's deja vu. The exact same thing has now happened twice in a row. Bad win rate, immediately buffed, people get better because they always do. It's a new champion that Riot wants to sell, so they're going to make the champion meta, then they become overpowered, and now they get nerfed. There's only so many times we can go through this cycle without talking about it critically and asking if there's a better solution. Probably the very first thing that needs to change is the fact that Riot seems really reactionary and emotional to how a champion comes out right away. We can kind of have a hard bound or a threshold on these win rates for the first couple of weeks. I feel like as long as the champion isn't lower than a 35% win rate or more than a 55% win rate after the first week, I'm not so sure that they should take immediate action. I believe the best scenario is to give it some time. Let players figure out how to play against a champion and play as a champion. I still remember back when Mordekaiser was first reworked, and earlier in this video we talked about how he was an easy to play champion that dominated and definitely did have overtuned numbers, but I also remember how people didn't even buy QSS, and when other teammates would tell them to purchase it, their response was always, wait, QSS works on his death realm? We have to remember that not everybody watches champion spotlights or tests things out on PvE or looks at things online or tests things out with their friends to see how brand new champions work before they come out. A lot of people just queue up and play. Something like using QSS against Mordekaiser Ultimate was not widespread information for the first month after he came out, even though it should have been. After just a few weeks of waiting and assessing the champion as we go day by day, we can get a much better understanding of their true power level. What if we could see Yuumi's win rate as it was without any buffs whatsoever if players weren't taking flash and weren't buying boots? What if Gwen's day 1 numbers were using a Doran's Blade start with no flash and E level 1, which is something that every Gwen player is now doing? Imagine if we could see Mordekaiser's win rate if everyone knew that QSS would actually take you out of the death realm, and his E is this ability that pulls you so you don't have teammates typing in all chat after dying to him, wait, what is that pull? What we're really trying to avoid is the fact that it feels like Riot is forcing new champions into the meta, either to sell a skin or an event, or to make their year's worth of work actually pay off and matter. They do spend a ton of time on these champions, so they want them to be relevant and meta, and I can't blame them for that. But at what cost? Years later, they have to have so many different mechanics removed that they also kind of wasted their time putting them in the kit. I'm trying to also consider Riot's end for a second. Think about how much of a headache something like Aphelios has been for them to get to this point where he's at now. This guy has gone through massive peaks and valleys of power, massive highs and lows. He was 200 years and then he was a dumpster fire. And now he's at least in an okay spot. There's probably still work to be done for sure, and many of you probably still hate playing against him, but at least to this point he's manageable now, and that's all that matters. But it's been a year and a half to get here. For Akshan, his release numbers looked like this. Yep, not very good, which is why he ended up receiving 2 hotfixes within the first couple of days. Apparently, his numbers were very low on purpose, and here's why.
Huh? Revive, stealth, forwards dash, backwards dash, swing?
If Akshan cancels the second shot, he gains a burst of movement speed. If you cancel your auto attack, you get movement speed? Why?
Oh my god, another passive, man. Why do they keep making these passives? Is this a book? Is it a book? Oh my god.
That champion gets released, the game's dead. I'm sorry, like, I'm gonna go variety stream. I'm not even joking. That's actually scary.
When Ashkan gets a takedown. What? All allies killed by the scoundrel are resurrected. Resurrected? What?
As you probably know by now, this champion has been given everything. Stealth, mobility, mixed damage, on-hit damage, he has a reset mechanic, he has a shield mechanic, he has a movement speed buff, mana regeneration, a way to hunt down enemies, a crazy good Syndra ult type of thing, and of course his controversial revive mechanic on his W passive, not even an ultimate passive. His W passive has a chance to win you a game all by itself or have a massive turnaround for your team. And Blitzcrank's W passive is a self-slow. Because his kit is essentially 2 different champions in one, Riot erred on the side of caution by outright stating his numbers needed to be lower. The volatility of this revive mechanic meant that he had to be weaker than most other champions on release in terms of his numbers. And right away, this is where I begin to see cracks in what they're saying and doing. There's a disconnect between what they say on social media and how they're thinking versus what actually does get done. I agree almost 100% with everything writers like Jag said about him following his release. They seem to understand the magnitude of this W passive. They were the first to admit that it's a very strong ability and probably kinda broken. So then I agree with their approach to say that he can't have very high damage due to his utility. For crying out loud, we've barely talked about the fact that on top of the revive mechanic, he has near infinite stealth, which players will definitely need a bit more practice on to make sure that they can make the most of it. But after they say this, they're then so quick on the draw to hotfix buff him, which is, like I said, a disconnect for what they've told us. As a community, we're not even entirely sure yet what his best role is, and we're making changes to the champion. It looks like he's supposed to be a mid laner, which makes perfect sense due to his perma-stealth. It allows him to roam around the map and make some plays, but there's also players like this on EU West. This person has figured out a great way to have success with him in the bottom lane. Of course, just because one person is doing it doesn't mean by default that he's now not a mid laner, and it doesn't even mean that he won't be good in the bottom lane either. There's just still so much to unpack about him. A concern that day one Akshan players had about him that was voiced heavily is the fact that his attack speed and damage felt clunky and very low. But again, that was kind of part of his design. Champions are supposed to have a power budget, and with his insane utility, it wasn't going to be loaded into attack speed and high damage. The very thing that they wanted to avoid because of power budget constraints is now a strong suit of his. He now does competitive damage and has top tier utility. So what's his weakness then? Why was the approach not to just give us time to figure out how to play him regardless of the bad win rate? These new champions are so complicated compared to the likes of Malphite or Rammus. There's no way that we can master it in one day. Are we really so sure that even half of all Akshan players in solo queue week 1 knew that you can strategically cancel an auto attack to gain movement speed? That's such a good little part of his kit that we've only started to see the best players take advantage of now. If we are going to make overloaded kits, it's probably also going to take longer to learn how to play that champion. It's possible that his stealth is not even being utilized nearly well enough. This is a teemo passive on steroids, but seldom do I see Akshan players waiting and stealthing into the lane like a teemo would. You can literally run by the minion wave, and the enemy team will think that there's full vision there, especially for solo queue, where people are constantly alt-tabbed, barely paying attention, not watching the minimap. You're going to be able to camp the lane and get so many free kills, yet I don't see anyone do this just yet. Give it a few more weeks and you'll probably hate playing against this ability. Hopefully we see some real change soon. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.